The Earth had always been a world of possibilities. Humanity's age of exploration had only just begun when first contact with the galactic community occurred. At first, the encounters were tentative, filled with cautious diplomacy and awe. Earth was a young species in a galaxy of ancient civilizations, its people still figuring out the intricacies of space travel and galactic politics. Despite the occasional tensions, many in the galactic community saw potential in humanity, raw potential, if only they could grow past their volatile history and enter a new phase of unity and progress. One sunny morning in the peaceful city of Erinder, a group of children filed into their school, bright-eyed and curious. It was an ordinary day, much like any other, with the usual hum of excitement as they prepared for their next lesson. The children were unaware that they were about to live through a moment in history that would shake the galaxy to its core. Across the globe, world leaders were preparing to finalize an agreement with the Galactic Empire. It was a treaty that would, in theory, secure peace between the two factions, humanity's first real opportunity to join the galactic stage as equals. In Erinder, Dr. Lydia Maxwell, a respected teacher, was in the midst of teaching a history lesson to a group of eager students. She'd always been fascinated by the stars, by the thought of humans joining the greater cosmic community. Her classroom was filled with posters of distant worlds, maps of the solar system, and pictures of the alien species Earth had recently encountered. She'd often encouraged her students to think beyond the limits of their home planet, to imagine a future where humanity wasn't confined to Earth. Imagine, she would say, how it would feel to step foot on a planet far from here, a world filled with creatures we've only seen in books or on screens. What would we do? What would we say to them? The children would often laugh, excited by the idea. Their futures seemed as limitless as the stars above. But none of them realized that the stars were not as welcoming as they thought. As the final preparations for the treaty were underway, Earth's government had been assured that the Galactic Empire viewed humanity as a species worthy of diplomacy. That was the public narrative. Behind closed doors, however, the truth was far more sinister. The Empire, with its centuries of dominance, had made its calculations. They saw Earth as a wild, unpredictable species, too unruly, too chaotic. Humanity had barely begun to understand the broader universe, let alone navigate its intricacies. The Empire's true interest in Earth wasn't peace. It was control. Dr. Maxwell was among the many who had faith in humanity's potential. She saw the treaty as an opportunity to build bridges with the stars. But as the day drew to a close, a series of encrypted transmissions from the Empire's flagship vessel were intercepted. It was the first time Dr. Maxwell felt a chill run down her spine. The message was not a congratulatory note for the peace talks. It was an order. The Empire had decided that humanity was too much of an unknown, too volatile. The solution, according to their plans, was to eliminate the future before it could rise. Their decision was ruthless. They would strike at the heart of humanity's future, its children. Hours later, the first attacks began. In a flash, everything changed. The once peaceful cities of Earth were shattered by sudden, overwhelming violence. Spaceports were bombarded from orbit. Imperial shock troops, clad in black armor, descended from the sky, their ships casting a shadow over the cities below. They were efficient, precise, and terrifying. These were not peaceful ambassadors. They were the harbingers of humanity's darkest day. Dr. Maxwell's school was one of the first targets. As the children were rounded up, confused and terrified, she watched in horror as the Empire's soldiers moved swiftly, indifferent to the screams of mothers and fathers. In a matter of hours, Earth had descended into chaos. The streets that were once filled with laughter and life now echoed with cries of anguish. The Empire's cold efficiency had begun its grim work. The massacre had started, and Earth would never be the same. Dr. Maxwell's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that her students, the children she had cared for, had no future in this new world. The same future she had imagined for them, their dreams of exploring the stars, was now a distant fantasy. And in that moment, a powerful resolve began to take root within her. She would not stand idly by. The world had to know. The galaxy had to know what the Empire was capable of. But more importantly, humanity had to know it wasn't done yet. The Empire's massacre of 800,000 children wasn't just a horrific act. It was the spark that would ignite humanity's fight for survival. And for the first time, Dr. Maxwell realized it was no longer about the stars. It was about saving Earth and ensuring the survival of everything humanity had ever fought for. The warning had to be sent, and it would be sent, no matter the cost. The quiet hum of the classroom was shattered by a distant rumble, followed by the terrifying screech of sirens that echoed across Erindor. Dr. Maxwell's heart stopped as the alarm blared throughout the city. Panic erupted immediately, and children scrambled to look out the windows. The streets, once full of calm pedestrians, were now filled with people rushing to shelters, shouting to one another in confusion and fear. The skies overhead were clouded by strange, dark shapes that descended with terrifying speed. "Everyone, stay calm," Dr. Maxwell ordered, her voice trembling, but firm. The students were already panicking, eyes wide with terror. They had no idea what was happening outside, but Dr. Maxwell felt a sinking feeling deep within her chest. She had a terrifying hunch that this was no ordinary attack. This was something far worse. A sudden explosion rocked the building, shaking the very foundation of the school. Dust rained down from the ceiling as the students screamed. Dr. Maxwell ushered them under the desks for safety, trying to maintain some semblance of order in the chaos. The sound of more explosions echoed from the distance, and the deafening sound of gunfire reached their ears. The Empire's forces had arrived, and they were not here for peace. The door to the classroom slammed open, and a group of soldiers in black armor stormed in, their weapons raised. The students froze, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. Dr. Maxwell's heart pounded as the soldiers scanned the room, their cold, faceless helmets making them seem more like machines than people. One of them stepped forward, his voice amplified by the comms in his suit. "Move, human," the soldier commanded. "You are under the authority of the Galactic Empire." Dr. Maxwell stood frozen for a moment, staring at the soldiers in disbelief. She had read about the Empire, heard their stories from diplomats and experts, but nothing had prepared her for the ruthless efficiency of their operation. These soldiers weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to execute a cold, calculated decision. The children, some still in shock, were lined up and forced from the classroom. The soldiers moved with chilling precision, herding them into groups. Dr. Maxwell tried to protest, but her voice faltered. She couldn't make a sound. The image of her students, terrified and helpless, was burned into her mind. She thought of her own daughter, far away, wondering if she was safe. The next few hours were a blur of confusion, fear, and heart-wrenching loss. The soldiers moved swiftly across the city, rounding up children from schools, parks, and homes. The Empire's forces were not content with simply arresting them. They executed their orders with military precision. The children were loaded onto transports, their faces pale and terror-stricken. The realization of what was happening dawned on Dr. Maxwell, slowly but surely. These children weren't being taken for questioning or to be held hostage. They were being marked for slaughter. There was no grand speech, no plea for humanity's cooperation. There was only the cold, unwavering force of the Empire's will. As she moved through the streets, hiding from the Empire's soldiers, Dr. Maxwell saw the devastation in its purest form. Parents were crying out for their children, some helplessly trying to stop the soldiers, only to be silenced by force. Children were screaming, their voices echoing through the streets as they were carted away to an uncertain fate. The Empire had deemed them disposable, a threat to their grand vision for the galaxy. The massacre was quick and merciless. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, entire communities lost in a matter of hours. The numbers were incomprehensible, minus 800,000 children, each one with a future now erased. There were no words to describe the horror that enveloped Earth in those moments. This was not just a battle. It was a calculated act of extermination. The Empire had decided that humanity, in all its chaotic brilliance, was too dangerous to allow to flourish, and their solution was to remove the source of that danger, Earth's next generation. Dr. Maxwell, hidden in an alley with a small group of survivors, trembled as she watched the events unfold. She had witnessed the unimaginable. The Empire, with all its grandeur and supposed moral superiority, had just demonstrated the true extent of its cruelty. It wasn't just an attack on Earth. It was an assault on everything humanity stood for, on its future, its hope, and its potential. But as she sat there, watching the city burn in the distance, a thought began to form in her mind. This wasn't the end. No matter how brutal, no matter how many lives were lost, humanity had something the Empire could never understand: the unyielding will to survive. The massacre of 800,000 children wasn't just a tragedy. It was the spark that would light the flame of resistance. Dr. Maxwell knew then, with a fierce certainty, that humanity's fight for survival had only just begun, and it was a fight the Empire would soon regret. In the aftermath of the massacre, Earth lay in ruins, its once vibrant cities reduced to smoldering husks. The skies were heavy with smoke, and the stench of destruction permeated the air. Dr. Lydia Maxwell had seen what the Empire had done, what they had stolen from the human race, and it was enough to ignite a fire inside her. Her students were gone, many of them torn from their homes, their futures shattered. She had seen the brutality firsthand, and it was no longer just about survival. It was about vengeance and justice. In the days that followed, Dr. Maxwell took refuge in the ruins of a small, hidden community on the outskirts of Erinder. There she found a group of survivors, some of whom had lost children, others who had narrowly escaped the Empire's grip. Among them were scientists, engineers, former military personnel, and even civilians who had simply refused to bend to the will of the Empire. These survivors were not just looking to hide. They were looking for a way to fight back. The resistance had begun. Dr. Maxwell became their leader, though it was a title she never wanted. She had been a teacher, a guide for young minds, but now she was something more, a symbol of humanity's refusal to die in the face of tyranny. As the survivors gathered, they shared stories of loss, of escape, and of their homes being burned to the ground. But it wasn't just the past that weighed on their shoulders, it was the future. And the future was something they had to fight for, no matter the cost. "How many of us are left?" Dr. Maxwell asked one evening, her voice quiet but resolute. The group had gathered around a crude map, discussing their next moves. "We've counted at least 1,000 survivors scattered across the country," said Marco, a former soldier who had been stationed at a military base on the outskirts of Erinder. "But that's just here. We know there are more, hidden in the ruins of the cities or deep in the countryside. We need to contact them. We need to organize," Dr. Maxwell said, her mind racing. "And we need to show the galaxy that humanity is not done, that we won't go quietly into the dark." Marco nodded, understanding her urgency. "I'll start reaching out to the others. The Empire can't cover every inch of this planet." Dr. Maxwell's voice softened, but her resolve only grew stronger. "This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about fighting back. We have something they don't understand. Our strength is in our numbers, in our will to adapt, to fight back. If we can unite the people of Earth, we can show the galaxy we will not be cowed." The resistance began its work in the shadows, moving quietly between the ruined cities and hidden settlements. They operated in secrecy, setting up safe houses, gathering supplies, and recruiting those who had lost everything to the Empire's brutal advance. Each day, more people joined the cause, ready to do whatever it took to make the Empire understand that Earth wasn't going to roll over. The children who had survived the massacre had not been silenced. They had become the symbol of humanity's unwavering spirit. As weeks passed, the resistance began to learn more about the Empire's movements. They discovered that the Empire's fleet had withdrawn, but only temporarily. The soldiers who had carried out the atrocities on Earth were still in place, waiting for orders. And though the Empire might have believed their victory was complete, the seeds of rebellion had been planted. Dr. Maxwell found herself in countless strategy meetings, planning covert missions, coordinating with survivors across the globe. She was no longer the teacher she had once been. She had become a strategist, a tactician. But despite the growing strength of the resistance, the task ahead was daunting. The Empire was vast, its resources nearly limitless, and Earth was nothing but a speck in the galactic scheme of things. Yet, something inside Dr. Maxwell refused to accept that humanity's fate was sealed. She thought of the children, her students, her daughter, all the innocent lives that had been stolen. Humanity is more than what they've done to us, she said, looking out across the group. Our future is not in their hands. It's in ours. And so, with each passing day, the resistance grew. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoring what was lost, about ensuring that humanity's spirit would never be extinguished by the Empire's cold hand. The fight had only just begun, but Dr. Maxwell knew one thing for sure. Earth would rise again. Dr. Maxwell paced restlessly in the dimly lit underground command center, a converted subway station beneath the ruins of Erindor. The resistance had grown in strength, but it was still a shadow of the force they needed to be. There was only one way to turn the tide, to rally the galaxy to their side, to let the galaxy know what the Empire had done and warn them of the dangers ahead. If humanity was going to survive, it couldn't do it alone. The past few weeks had been filled with harrowing encounters and small victories. They had managed to intercept Imperial communications, learned the Empire's fleet was preparing for a full-scale retreat, perhaps to regroup before launching a final strike on Earth. Time was running out, and Dr. Maxwell knew that if humanity was to have any chance of standing up to the Empire, they needed allies, and they needed them fast. With the help of a few resourceful engineers, the Resistance had managed to secure a transmitter that could broadcast beyond Earth's atmosphere. It was a risky move. The Empire would likely detect the signal, but the danger of staying silent far outweighed the risk. The message Dr. Maxwell had to send wasn't just a plea for help. It was a warning. The Empire's reach was far, and they had already shown how ruthless they could be. If humanity did not stand, it wouldn't just be Earth they would target. The galaxy would be next. Gathering a small team of Resistance members, Dr. Maxwell stood before the transmitter. The room was filled with the low hum of machinery, and her heart raced as she prepared to speak. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind. But now that it was real, the weight of the message felt more intense than ever. "Are we ready?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Ready," Marco, the former soldier, replied. His fingers hovered over the controls, ready to initiate the transmission. Dr. Maxwell took a deep breath. She knew that what she was about to say would travel across the stars, that it could mean the difference between hope and total annihilation for her people. She stepped forward and activated the comms system. The screen flickered, and the message began to broadcast across the galaxy. "This is Dr. Lydia Maxwell of Earth, leader of the human resistance," she began, her voice clear but filled with sorrow. "I speak for the survivors of Earth. Over the past weeks, our planet has been ravaged by the Galactic Empire. 800,000 children, the future of our species, have been murdered, erased. Our cities are in ruins, our families torn apart. But we will not surrender." Her voice cracked slightly as she continued, the weight of her words pressing down on her. "I know what you think of us, that we are just another young species, insignificant and wild. But we are more than that. Our resilience, our ability to adapt and fight against the odds, is our greatest strength. We have witnessed what the Empire is capable of. And now we know we are not the only ones who are at risk." Dr. Maxwell's gaze shifted to the map on the wall, where scattered dots represented other star systems, many of them still unaware of the Empire's true nature. The Resistance had made contact with some, but the majority of the galaxy was still blind to the Empire's true face. "This is not just a warning for Earth," Dr. Maxwell continued, her tone growing more forceful. "It is a warning for all who have ever lived under the shadow of the Empire. We have learned the truth. They do not seek peace. They seek domination, and they will stop at nothing to ensure no one can challenge their reign. If they can destroy us, they will destroy you too." She paused, her eyes steely. "Flee now, before it's too late. Stand with us, and we will fight together. But if we stand alone, we will fall. And with us, the future of the galaxy will fall too." The transmission continued, reaching across systems, lighting up countless consoles in distant, unsuspecting places. As Dr. Maxwell's words echoed through the void of space, she felt a strange sense of hope. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a call to action. She had no idea who would hear it or how they would respond, but she knew this was the only chance Earth had. As the transmission ended, the room was silent. Dr. Maxwell stood there for a moment, catching her breath. The weight of what she had just done hung heavy in the air. "We've done what we can," she said quietly. "Now, we wait." But deep down, she knew the wait wouldn't be long. They had just lit a fire across the galaxy, one that the Empire would soon feel. The days that followed the transmission were tense. The Resistance had done what they could, sent out a plea to the galaxy, a warning to all who might listen. But the silence in the aftermath was almost unbearable. Dr. Maxwell spent countless hours in the command center, staring at the flickering lights of the communication consoles. There was no immediate response, and the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her shoulders. Had anyone heard? Had anyone cared? Or had the message simply fallen into the void, swallowed up by the vast, indifferent galaxy? In the makeshift barracks, the survivors tried to keep busy. Some scavenged for food. Others worked to refine their weapons and communications equipment. The Resistance had to stay sharp, stay prepared. But there was an air of unease in every corner of the hideout. The Empire had already shown what it was capable of. If the warning had reached any ears, they knew the Empire would retaliate swiftly. It was only a matter of time before the consequences of their defiance would come knocking at Earth's door. Marco, who had been working tirelessly to keep their supplies secure, approached Dr. Maxwell one afternoon, his face grim. "We've got word from our scouts," he said, his voice low. "The Empire is shifting its fleet. They're preparing for something big. We think they're coming back to Earth." Dr. Maxwell's stomach tightened. She had been expecting this, but the reality of it still hit hard. The Empire wouldn't let a rebellion like theirs go unanswered. They would return with all the might they had, and they would crush any sign of defiance before it could spread. "What are our options?" Dr. Maxwell asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She couldn't afford panic now, not with everything at stake. "We've been trying to make contact with the outer systems," Marco replied. "There's been no word from them since your broadcast, but we've got a few leads. We've heard rumors about some groups that might be willing to help us, but they're far out. We'd need ships, supplies, and time. We can't rely on the Empire's delay forever." Dr. Maxwell nodded, the weight of the situation sinking deeper into her bones. The Resistance was still too small to confront the Empire directly, and without help, they wouldn't be able to mount an effective defense. She had hoped that the galaxy would come to Earth's aid, but the delay in responses left her with growing doubts. They needed more time, more resources, more hope. Then the unthinkable happened. 2 days after the Empire's fleet had been detected moving toward Earth, a sudden, unexpected signal broke through their communications equipment. A burst of static, followed by a voice that sent chills down Dr. Maxwell's spine. "This is Captain Ryle of the Azarian Free Fleet," the voice crackled. "We've received your message, Dr. Maxwell. We are coming." Dr. Maxwell's heart skipped a beat. The Azarian Free Fleet was a small, but fiercely independent faction of the galaxy that had long resisted Imperial control. They had been a whisper in the dark, a group known for their defiance, but not widely trusted by the larger galactic powers. It was a miracle that they had heard the message, let alone decided to help. "Captain Ryle, you're certain?" Dr. Maxwell asked, her voice catching. She couldn't believe it. This was the break they needed, the glimmer of hope that Earth had desperately been waiting for. "We are certain," the captain's voice responded, clearer now. "We've been watching the Empire for years. We know the cost of their cruelty. You've stirred something within us, Dr. Maxwell. We will bring reinforcements, but we'll need you to hold them off until we arrive." "How long do we have?" she asked, the urgency evident in her tone. "Not long. We'll be in your orbit within a week. Be ready." The transmission ended abruptly, and Dr. Maxwell stood frozen for a moment, processing the enormity of what had just happened. The Azarian Free Fleet was coming. The galaxy hadn't turned a blind eye to Earth's suffering after all. There were those who were willing to fight, who understood the Empire's true nature. The Resistance had just gained an ally, perhaps their only chance for survival. As the news spread through the underground hideout, a wave of cautious hope swept through the survivors. It wasn't a guaranteed victory, but it was a lifeline. The fight was no longer just Earth's fight. It was a galactic one, a battle between freedom and tyranny. Dr. Maxwell knew that the next few days would be critical. They had to prepare, gather every last scrap of information about the Empire's forces, fortify their defenses. And they had to send one final message to the Azarians, to all the forces that might join them. Earth would fight with everything it had. But as Dr. Maxwell looked out into the night, she knew that the real battle had only just begun. The days passed quickly as Earth's resistance prepared for the arrival of the Azarian Free Fleet. Dr. Maxwell and the other leaders of the underground movement worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts to bolster their defenses. The clock was ticking, and with each passing hour, the Empire's return became more imminent. There was no room for error. If they failed to hold their ground, Earth would fall. But now, for the first time since the massacre, Dr. Maxwell felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in weeks. Hope. The Azarians weren't the only faction aware of Earth's plight. While their fleet wasn't large, their commitment to standing against the Empire had inspired others. Small pockets of resistance, fringe groups, and individuals who'd quietly been gathering strength. The transmission had sparked something much bigger than Dr. Maxwell had anticipated. The message had been a beacon in the dark, rallying those who had long been under the heel of imperial rule. Messages from distant systems began to trickle in, pledging support in whatever way they could, from starships to weapons caches. However, not everyone was convinced. The Resistance had allies, but it also had enemies. Some feared that interfering with the Empire's affairs could make them targets. Others doubted humanity's ability to hold its ground. Even as ships from the Azarian Free Fleet slipped into Earth's orbit, whispers of doubt still lingered among some of Earth's own survivors. But Dr. Maxwell refused to let fear control her. Fear was what the Empire relied on, and if there was one thing humanity had proven, it was that they could defy fear. In the final hours before the Imperial fleet arrived, Dr. Maxwell and Marco went over their plans one last time in the dimly lit war room. A holographic map flickered in front of them, showing the remaining Imperial forces gathered on the outskirts of Earth's orbit. It was a vast fleet, far larger than the Azarian ships. The Empire had sent its best, elite forces designed for planetary sieges. The odds were grim, but they had no choice but to fight. Captain Ryle's fleet is making its way to the far side of the planet, Marco explained. They'll come in hot, attempt to draw attention away from our position here. We'll need to hold our ground at all costs. If we can stall them long enough, maybe we can give the Azarians a window. Dr. Maxwell nodded, her gaze fixed on the map. And if we don't stall them long enough? We won't think like that, Marco replied firmly. If we do our job, they'll have their chance. The thought of facing down the Empire's forces again, after everything they had already suffered, was almost too much to bear. But Dr. Maxwell knew that they couldn't afford to hesitate. If the resistance was going to stand any chance, they needed to hold their positions until the Azarians arrived, and they needed to strike hard when the moment came. In the days leading up to the battle, Earth's survivors gathered in makeshift fortresses, relying on stolen technology, improvised weapons, and sheer determination to mount a defense. Every child lost, every family shattered, was now a rallying cry. The resistance was no longer just a ragtag group of survivors. It was a force that had endured unimaginable hardship and had come out the other side ready to fight back. As the sun set on the final day before the battle, Dr. Maxwell stood outside the command center, looking up at the sky. In the distance, she could see the faint silhouette of ships beginning to converge on Earth, ships that weren't just ships anymore, but a testament to the strength and resolve of those who had answered her call. The Azarian Free Fleet wasn't just coming to help, they were coming to fight, and they would not be alone. Tonight, we defend not just Earth, Dr. Maxwell whispered to herself, but every soul who's ever stood against tyranny. The resistance was ready. The storm was coming, and Earth was prepared to stand tall against it. The first blasts rocked the ground before the sun had even fully set. The Empire's fleet had arrived, their warships dropping out of hyperspace like a dark wave crashing upon a shore. The sky above Erindor flickered with bright bursts of fire, signaling the start of what would be the most brutal conflict Earth had ever known. Dr. Maxwell stood on the rooftop of the Resistance's command center, looking up at the fiery sky, the looming shadow of the Empire's ships cutting through the atmosphere. She felt a surge of fear mixed with something else, a deep, unwavering resolve. This was it, the final stand. Marco was already in motion, giving orders to the scattered resistance forces that had taken positions around the city. The streets were lined with barricades, and every available fighter was ready. The hope they'd carried for so long was about to be put to the test. Earth's survivors would either win or fall here, in this brutal moment of reckoning. Dr. Maxwell, Marco's voice crackled through her comms. They're deploying ground troops. We've got to keep them from breaching the inner walls. Our best hope is to stall them until the Azarians make their move. Dr. Maxwell's heart pounded. The clock was ticking. She glanced to the horizon where, in the distance, the silhouette of the Azarian Free Fleet began to emerge, like a tiny spark of light in the darkness. But even as their fleet moved into position, it was clear that they couldn't arrive in time to stop the Empire from pushing forward. All units prepare to engage, Dr. Maxwell said, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. Hold them at the barricades. Make them pay for every inch they take. The first wave of Imperial troops arrive, their armor gleaming under the fires of the battle, advanced infantry storming the streets, bolstered by massive war machines. Earth's defenders fought back with everything they had, homemade rifles, makeshift grenades, and sheer willpower. Despite being outmatched in terms of numbers and firepower, the resistance refused to give an inch. They'd fought like animals defending their home, as if their very survival depended on each shot, each move, each moment. Dr. Maxwell joined the fray alongside Marco, leading a small group of resistance fighters toward a choke point. Explosions rained down around them, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning debris. Her hand shook as she gripped her weapon, but her mind was focused. This wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message to the Empire that Earth could never be crushed so easily. Push them back. Dr. Maxwell shouted over the din of battle, rallying her group to hold the line. As she led the charge, the sound of distant engines thundered across the battlefield. The Azarian ships were entering the atmosphere, their sleek forms cutting through the sky with alarming speed. The Empire's fleet, distracted by the sudden shift in momentum, faltered for a moment. It was enough of an opening for the Azarians to strike. The first Azarian ship dropped into the fray, firing precision missiles at the Imperial ground forces. The explosions lit up the darkened skies as the Azarians began to take control of the skies. But the battle on the ground was still fierce. Earth's fighters were holding, but only just. The Empire's forces were relentless. Their strategy was to overwhelm with sheer power, and for a while, it seemed to work. Dr. Maxwell saw it, an Imperial dropship descending towards the heart of Erinder, a strike that would crush the Resistance's command center if left unchecked. She couldn't let that happen. "Marco, cover me," she shouted, running toward the ship, her feet pounding against the rubble. As she approached, she spotted a group of Resistance fighters aiming their weapons at the dropship, but their fire was ineffective against the heavily armored craft. Dr. Maxwell gritted her teeth. They needed something heavier. She ran toward a nearby weapons cache and grabbed a powerful anti-tank missile launcher. The tension in her body was palpable as she aimed at the dropship's vulnerable underbelly. The launch was a calculated risk. If she missed, they'd all be sitting ducks. With a deep breath, Dr. Maxwell pulled the trigger. The missile streaked through the air, slamming into the Imperial ship with a deafening roar. The dropship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves through the street and throwing Dr. Maxwell to the ground. But when she rose to her feet, her heart skipped a beat, not from the blast, but from what she saw next. The Azarian fleet had made its move, their ships now engaged in full battle, locking the Empire's forces in a deadly stalemate in the skies. The Empire's advance was slowing, then faltering. For the first time in hours, Dr. Maxwell felt a glimmer of hope. The battle was far from over. But now, Earth had a fighting chance. The war for Earth was no longer just Earth's war. It was the galaxy's war. And Earth had made its stand. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity. The air above Erinder was filled with the thunderous roar of warships clashing as Imperial and Azarian ships exchanged fire high above the city. On the ground, the Resistance held their positions with everything they had, their numbers dwindling but their spirits unbroken. Dr. Maxwell stood amidst the chaos, her eyes focused on the unfolding battle above and the fierce struggle below. She had seen her people pushed to the brink of extinction, but now, in the heat of this battle, they were fighting like they never had before. Every Resistance fighter, every survivor, had become a part of something much bigger than themselves. The Empire had underestimated humanity's resilience, and that mistake was proving to be their downfall. The Azarians were doing their part. Their fleet, though smaller than the Empire's, had proven to be nimble and precise. They had engaged the Empire's command ships with an intensity that forced the Imperial fleet to split its focus. The Empire had expected a quick, brutal end to the Resistance, but they had underestimated the resolve of both the Azarians and the humans of Earth. Dr. Maxwell wiped the sweat from her brow, her heart racing, as explosions echoed in the distance. Marco, by her side, kept relaying orders, ensuring the remaining Resistance forces kept the pressure on the Empire's ground troops. They had no choice but to press forward. With the Azarians giving them the chance, the Resistance had to seize it. Earth's future depended on it. "Keep pushing," Marco shouted, his voice hoarse but determined. "We've got them on the ropes. Don't let up now." Dr. Maxwell nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking of her students, of the children who had been taken, the lives snuffed out before they had a chance to live. It was that memory that fueled her now, that memory that had propelled the Resistance from the moment they'd heard the news of the massacre. She couldn't let that loss define them. It couldn't be the end of their story. Her communicator buzzed. She pulled it from her belt, seeing the blinking signal from the Azarian fleet. It was Captain Ryle. "Dr. Maxwell, we've engaged the Empire's flagship." Ryle's voice came through, calm but urgent. "They're pushing back, but we're not out of the woods yet. We need your people to hold the ground for another hour. We can't afford to lose our momentum." "Understood, Captain," Dr. Maxwell replied, determination in her voice. "We'll hold them as long as we can." Marco was already barking orders again, moving swiftly between groups of Resistance fighters. The Empire's forces were finally beginning to show signs of cracking. Their advanced technology, their overwhelming numbers, it didn't matter. The fight had become something more. It was a fight for survival, for freedom. And it wasn't just humanity's fight anymore. It was a fight for the soul of the galaxy. The next hour was a blur of violence, explosions, and the screams of victory and defeat. Resistance fighters pushed forward, each one fighting with the memory of all they had lost. Earth was holding, despite the odds. And then, just as the Empire's ground forces began to retreat, the decisive moment came. The Azarian fleet broke through the Empire's lines. Their ships moved in a calculated, swift maneuver, catching the Empire's flagship off guard. Dr. Maxwell watched as the Empire's massive command ship, a symbol of their cruel reign, was struck with devastating precision. The explosion lit up the sky, a bright beacon that heralded the Empire's retreat. The battle was won. For a moment, there was silence. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by a quiet, collective gasp. Then, a cheer rose from the resistance, ragged and exhausted but full of triumph. The Empire had lost. Earth had survived. Dr. Maxwell felt a rush of emotions overwhelm her: relief, exhaustion, and a profound sense of gratitude. They had done it. Against all odds, Earth had stood firm. The Azarians had been their allies, but the victory had been hard-earned by humanity itself. "We did it," Marco said beside her, his voice filled with disbelief. Dr. Maxwell nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon where the last of the Imperial ships were retreating. The battle was over, but the war, their war, had only just begun. The Resistance had won Earth's freedom. Now they would take the fight to the stars, spreading the message of Earth's defiance. The galaxy would no longer be a place of unchecked Imperial dominance. The victory was just the first step toward a galaxy united in the fight for freedom. As Dr. Maxwell looked around at the faces of those who had fought beside her, she felt the weight of what they had accomplished. The children who had been lost were not forgotten. Their sacrifice would fuel the fight for generations to come. The future of Earth and the galaxy was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Dr. Maxwell felt a sense of hope. Earth was free, and this was just the beginning.